It is Big Play Detroit, and I am emotional. Just for the people who are wondering, I want to set this up before we get into the meat and potatoes of this show. A great show. It is a great day to do a show. Austin had a late night prior engagement, and he will be on this show. We recorded this thing out of order. So if the first segment seems a lot more emotional than the other ones, there's a reason why. He'll be back here in segment number 2. We got Sisler behind the sticks, but just wanted to explain that. It's not a continuity error, but we just want to make sure that we can get things up and out as timely as possible. Okay. The Michigan Wolverines are national champions. They did it. 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 I'm still jumping up and down. I'm still way too overly emotional, like a kid in a candy store right now. This is far and away. And look, I'm off the cuff right now. It's 12:30 in the morning as of the time I'm recording this. It is as emotional as I have ever been following a sporting event. And I'm sure that I'll embarrass myself again and continue to tear up here as we talk about this team and this amazing season. Just the greatest season. I mean, you put up with a lot of pain as a sports fan for a year like this and moments like this. And I'm so unbelievably proud of this program that has bounced back from a lot. That it always seems like when Michigan basketball has a down year or loses a great coach, people are ready to bury them. And the fact is they had their rough patch. This program is going nowhere. And this is an everything school. And they have proven it with this unbelievable season. They won 2 games in the Final Four. First one being a quintessential, probably from a performance standpoint, the shining moment, ironically, of Michigan's season. A game that some people, not me, but some people were calling the pseudo-national championship. Michigan just completely and utterly obliterates Arizona in a game that they dominated in every single facet. Arizona, just for Ryan Russillo talked about this, and I want to just recap this because it's a very fair point. Arizona was one of the top 5 teams on KenPom ever. They lost 2 games this year. I want to say it was back-to-back games. After that, they won every game before, and they won every game after. And they came into a coin flip game against Michigan and were down by 27 in the second half. It is the game, and look, there's a lot of these, but I would say when people think of this Michigan basketball team, that's the game that they're going to think of, is a team that had it all, that had the ability to take good clubs. Michigan played a tough schedule. They played Purdue. They played Illinois. They played Michigan State. They played Arizona. They played Tennessee in the Elite Eight. They went to some difficult road environments, and they completely shit-pumped everyone, and that's the one that's going to stand out. Then you have the much uglier game in the second game in the national championship against Connecticut. Whale of a game, and Michigan had arguably their worst offensive performance of the year, and Dusty was open about it, saying, man, if you would have told me we would have shot like this, I don't know if we would have won. But Michigan did what they have found a way to do all year, which is grind. They played tremendous, tremendous defense. And I think that's the big story, one of the big stories to take away from this thing, which is the fact that both UConn and Arizona were teams that believed that they had the ability to go mano-a-mano with Michigan's size, and they couldn't do it. Did Mara or Johnson have the best offensive game in the national championship? No, but these guys were so good defensively. I mean, how many shots did Michigan block in this game and in the Arizona game? Just wearing down their opponents. And they got into a rock fight, and Michigan was able to win one. They haven't had a whole lot of those this year, and that's why it was nerve-wracking. Michigan was playing UConn's game, and I haven't read any of Hurley's post-game reactions yet, but I'm willing to venture he probably felt like, man, that was, in a lot of ways, that was our game. But it goes to show what this team was really from the jump this season, which is a team that had a little bit of everything, a team that could win in so many different ways, and in an ugly game, playing UConn's game, a team with a championship pedigree. I mean, Danny Hurley, hadn't lost in the Final Four ever until tonight. Michigan finds a way to knock him off, capping off the greatest season in Michigan basketball history. Outside of 1976 Indiana, I would say that you could call this the greatest team in the history of Big Ten basketball. really. And that's where I want to just talk about the legacy of this team, because if you guys watch the post-game breakdowns and everything, I assessed the game and everything. It was an ugly one. It was a slog. Michigan, Trey McKinney knocked down a few shots finally. Elliot Cadeau is a guy I'm exceptionally happy for. And there's a couple things I want to address here. Number one, okay, and we will get to the legacy of this team, but number one, it is very clear that Michigan hit the biggest home run of all time by hiring Dusty May. And look, the results speak for themselves. I understand that. There's a lot of banners with his fingerprints on them that are going to be hanging at Chrysler Center. The guy's 2 years in to his tenure. It's pretty unbelievable what he's done. But beyond the acquiring of these players, I think the biggest thing that Dusty has done correctly, outside of win a ton of games, is construct the roster that he's wanted. But even beyond that, the evaluations that he's had of these players has been glorious. And I think Cadeau, I'm so happy he won Most Outstanding Player, because I think Cadeau is a prime example of that, because there were question marks. There were a lot of people that felt like Michigan got worse at the point guard position when Trey Donaldson went to Miami and Cadeau came in from UNC. Cadeau, I'm not going to say he was run out of UNC necessarily, but there were a lot of fans that were pretty happy when he left. And he had moments where he would, come undone. But man, when it mattered, he made big shot after big shot, and he was the best player in this Final Four by far. He was unbelievable, and it's those things, because we talk about talent and bringing in talent, and we talk about how great Beeline was at developing talent. He was. And we bring up the fact that Juwan had a lot of talent, but it's what you get from that talent. It's the assessment you make of these guys, finding things that maybe other coaches aren't going to be willing to find. And they did that with Cadeau, and they did that with Mara. Yes, this was the most talented team in college basketball all season. Undeniable. At the same time, Mara wasn't putting up 20 a game at UCLA. Guy was playing 12 minutes. Johnson was a good at Illinois, right? But he became a beast here. He wasn't making threes like he was at Michigan. Cadeau was kind of messy, ends up becoming this team's most outstanding player in the Final Four. And obviously Yaxel Lendeborg will lead this program as one of the most impactful players that they've ever seen here, and maybe the most impactful one-year guy, quite frankly. A conference player of the year, regional most outstanding player, played a game in 3/4 of a game, basically on one leg, and just willed himself. Didn't play his best game, but the fact is, he was still out there playing defense and guarding, and you could tell he was open about it in both interviews that he had. He didn't feel good, right? And there were no excuses. And that is a valuable lesson to learn for all the people that talk about this team and talk about this day and age of college basketball. And look, we can go back and forth about the age that we're in right now and whether it's good for the sport or good for college athletics. And I think that's a fair argument, right? But the thing I will never buy are the people who say that Michigan just bought their way to a championship. Okay? How'd that work out for Kentucky this year? Just straight up. What you need at the end of the day in all sports are guys who want to be there, guys with a willingness to fight. And Yaxel Lendeborg, who could have easily, he could have said, I'm done, really. We live in a world this year where arguably a top 2 draft pick, future top 3 draft pick, was asking to be taken out of games at Kansas, right? So you can give me all the talent you want. It sounds cliche, but heart is an immeasurable thing to measure. That's kind of a silly way to put it, but you can't measure heart, right? And this team had a lot of it all year. And then you take a step back and you wonder legacy, right? And 37-3, they won a great Big Ten. A Big Ten that was the best conference in the country this year. Big Ten that had 4 teams in the Elite Eight. That had 2 other teams in the Sweet 16, right? That had 2 teams in the Final Four. Okay? They won it by 4 games. They lost 3 games all season, all to quality opponents, right? Duke was the number 1 overall seed in the tournament. Wisconsin was a team that could get really hot, 5 seed in the NCAA tournament. Purdue, who won their conference and made it to won their conference tournament, sorry, and made it to the Elite Eight, right? I know that when talking about this team's legacy, I may be accused of a little bit of homerism because of the group that I root for, but I want to compare them to the football team real quick. even if you remove the Connor Stallion stuff, and I know that you can't, but let's try to for a second, that Michigan team in 2023 was amazing. 15-0, put a ton of guys in the NFL, had a generationally great defense. Everyone knew that was their chance. Everyone knew that was their year. It had to be. And they made the most of it, right? And they got some good luck. That's fine. You need that to be a champion. They were healthy all season. They had guys that came back. Corum came back. Sainra still came back. Like guys that you didn't quite expect, weren't sure. They all came back, had amazing years, right? And let's be real. While Michigan was the best team in the country that year, there was not a 2019 LSU that season. There was not one of those Bama teams that was just all-time great. And who cares? National championships are national championships. So I'm acknowledging that I can spot this stuff, that I'm not just being a homer when talking about my teams that win championships. With all of that said, we're talking legacy. This is one of the greatest college basketball teams of all time. I look at the 21st century alone. There are maybe 2 teams that have won national championships that I would say could beat this Michigan team on their best day. 2012 Kentucky with Anthony Davis, they went 38-2, had a very similar season, dominated their conference, lost their conference tournament championship game, right? Had Anthony Davis #1 pick in the draft that year. And maybe the UConn team from 2 years ago. But really, I would say the only one that I'd put up there is 2012 Kentucky. I think Michigan beats any of the Florida teams, including the ones that went back-to-back. They beat 2000 Michigan State. I don't want to hear this. They would destroy that team. Or at least they'd win an ugly game like what they won tonight. I think they're better than any of the Duke teams that won it. Really, I think they're better than any of the Nova teams. I don't think this is homerism. When you look at the margin of victory, average margin of victory, the guys they're going to put in the NBA, and the fact that there was not a single freaking weakness that this team had all season. There was nothing that you could exploit. Sometimes they got a little bit sloppy with the basketball. Besides that, they made their shots. They had depth. They lost a player, an important player with a key stretch of the season still to go, and rolled through their regional, right? Won their first 5 games of this tournament by double figures, scoring 90 or more points in each one. I mean, I could keep listing off these numbers. It's staggering. Yes. This will go down as one of the greatest college basketball teams of all time. Top 5, maybe not. Top 10, I think so, legitimately. First Big Ten team to do it in 26 years, and just on a personal level, look, I'm still trying to recover, and I'm still trying to let it sink in, but this is absolutely a team that was a gift. And I know a lot of Michigan fans feel that way, and I understand it. I don't recall ever being as emotional after a sporting event. And there is a little bit of sadness. And this is just the last thing I'm going to leave you with here, because championships matter. We want our teams to be the last team standing, right? It's fun. But there was a little bit of sadness that I felt as Michigan was celebrating there. And the dust was kind of settling, and all the confetti had come down, because it's over. You know, we get so caught up in being the last team standing that we sometimes forget about the chase. The chase is the fun part. Watching that national championship, that wasn't fun. That was stressful. But the season was fun. The belief was fun. Knowing they had a chance was fun. And for them to finish the job, I have never had a greater appreciation for any sports team that I have ever watched. Dusty May and this program have created something that is everlasting. They did it for each other, and they did it for Dad. Congratulations, Michigan. We'll be back in segment number 2, talking some Tigers stuff. But yeah, I'm proud of this one, and I'm proud of this team. Be back in a second. Back for segment number 2, and for the people watching this on YouTube that might have noticed, no, I'm not manly enough to grow facial hair between segments 1 and 2. We're filming this a little bit out of order, as Michigan's national championship game against Connecticut was a late game tonight, and we just wanted to make sure that we were giving you most bang for your buck and talking about everything while we were still, of sound mind and sound body. Didn't want to keep ourselves up all night and make things more difficult than needed to be. We are marching on now, talking about the Tigers week that was their first home series of the year against the St. Louis Cardinals. For some reason, I almost forgot. I had to think about that for a second. The Tigers find themselves, as of the time of this recording, they're 4-5. Now, by the time you are watching this on Tuesday, they will have played a game against the Minnesota Twins with Casey Mize on the mound. And, I when talking about the Tigers on this show, this weekly show, the one thing I don't want to do is just make it like okay, well, this is what happened Monday, this is what happened Tuesday, let's talk. I want it to be more of an all-encompassing thing, more of a broad thing, and talk about the issues and or just, the positives that may be surrounding this team. And in segment number 5, we are going to discuss AJ Hinch, because there was controversy, and it's legit controversy because it wasn't just hindsight controversy. There was controversy about some of the moves that he made over the weekend involving the pinch hitting situation. Obviously, AJ Hinch and this team known for being a team that pinch hits more than anybody, and we will discuss that in segment number 5. But, at this point in the year, you look for things that are either going to be things that long-term are going to help this team, or potential issues that could plague this team long-term. Like, what are the things at this point in the year that are legitimate? What are the things that are fluky? Because even, I'm going to keep saying this, 9 games in, 3 series, that is still a relatively small sample size. And I want to focus on something that I talked about after Sunday's game, because I think it's something that has cost Detroit not just already a few times this season, but going back to last year as well. There's so much talk about the kind of player that Scott Harris wants in Detroit. He wants a guy that's going to be capable of controlling the strike zone. And in fairness to him, when you look at the guys that they've drafted, and now McGonigal here at the big league level, that are already in this lineup, they've been very consistent with that. One thing that they haven't talked a lot about, it's not to say they haven't focused on it, but one thing that I think has not been maybe the primary focus of this organization in terms of their player development over the last several years is the defense. Now, AJ loves defensive versatility, and when you look at this roster right now and you see McGonigal and McKinstry and Javi, these guys that you can move, even Colt Keith, these guys that you can move around the diamond, that you could put at 2 or 3 different positions any given day. Look, it's great to have that. At the same time, there have been multiple games already this season, and I think it's an issue that they had to deal with a year ago as well. This is not, for a team that by definition is a relatively young group still, a particularly athletic team on the infield. Outfield, it's a little bit different. Parker provides an elite center field. Riley, as weird as he looks out there, is still great to be a plus defender in left. Carey's gotten better in right. If it's not Carey, you could put Vierling out there or somebody else. It's pretty good in the outfield. But we've seen, whether it's pitchers making mistakes or Javi making errors or double plays not being able to be completed or the inexperience of Colt and or McGonigal at third base, we've seen this team play some sloppy baseball to start this season. And there's certain guys who might get off to a slow start that I look at and say, all right, give it time. They're going to develop. They're going to come along. I have my concerns that this is an issue that could potentially bother this team for the remainder of this season. And I think that it's something that I'm not going to say the Tigers have necessarily let it slip, or it's something the Tigers haven't focused on, but I think that there's been so much talk about the offense, and understandably so. But this is a team that's greatest strength, as we've talked about over the last several seasons, but especially since signing Valdez in this offseason, is their pitching, primarily their starting pitching. And I think that if that is going to be your primary strength, which I have no problem with, that's how you win in October, that's how you win in this ballpark, you also need to do all you can to help these pitchers out. And the fact that you look at the diamond right now, and outside of Torque, who I know he was drafted as a third baseman, we'll leave that aside for a second, is, that's his primary position at first base. Glaber is average at second. Colt is sort of positionless. I think McGonigal has a relatively high ceiling, but he's a young player playing positions he hasn't played before in third base. And you have Javi, who's been pretty inconsistent with the errors to start the season and whose defense has seen sort of a regression over the last few years. The bottom line is that with this team right now, there's so many things that I'm looking at and I view as too small a sample size for me to be concerned about. Even the offense we saw start to get going a little bit at points in that series against St. Louis. McGonigal's looked excellent. Colts looked excellent. But I think over time, this is something that has plagued this team for a minute and is going to continue to. In this league especially, in Austin, I know you've played baseball, but we're talking the big leagues at this point. You cannot give teams extra at-bats. You cannot give them extra bases. You cannot give them extra outs. And the reason they didn't sweep that series against St. Louis was inability to execute with 2 strikes, and sloppiness. DeJesus spikes the ball into right field. They weren't able to finish a double play with Javi on a throw to second base that was a little bit off. It's those little things, and I think that this team's one of their weaknesses is that, at least when it comes to their performance in the infield, not the most fundamentally sound group. And so, Austin, I'm going to toss it over to you. Am I over-exaggerating with the potential of this being a legitimate issue for this ball club? Because ultimately we've spent so much time focusing on the offense and the pitching. I think for a young squad, fundamentally, it's not really grading out to be a plus group, and that concerns me.
No, you're absolutely correct. I will say, if defense is our primary concern, I feel like things are headed in the right direction, right? You know, that means the pitching is right. That means the hitting is at least coming around. I still have some concerns in that department, but yeah, overall, this defense is very positionless. There are a lot of guys who are just not that fast. We have a couple really elite defenders in the spots that you would want them. You've got Dillon Dingler, who just won a Gold Glove. You've got Parker Meadows out there in center field, who is insanely fast. And Javi, when he's on, he can make some incredible plays. But so far this season, he has been an absolute liability out there at shortstop. So hopefully he can lock in here a little bit. But something I've talked about kind of that I see as an issue with the Tigers, where I think the Lions in football have gotten really right, is Dan Campbell and Brad Holmes have said, like, in their roster construction, they try to play complementary football, right? They try to get guys that help other guys out that make sense. You know, it's not just about getting the most talented guys. And, you know, the Tigers have a lot of pretty good players, but like, think about how many lefties we have on this team. Think about how many guys who are just like average on defense that we have, how many guys who are just average in speed or like don't really have one primary position. You know, there's a lot of that going on. And I know that a lot of people will kind of point to AJ Hinch and think about his time in Houston, how he kind of revolutionized, at least in this modern era, you know, how to mix and match things and, you know, play the long game, play some chess. But like his time in Houston, he still had George Springer and Jose Altuve and Alex Bregman and Carlos Correa all in their prime, you know. We don't really have that here. We have some pretty talented guys, some guys I'm very excited about, some guys who have already been all-stars. But like even Riley Green, who is probably the closest thing that we have to, you know, an MVP caliber guy, I don't think that's in him. Like, very talented guy. I think he is a perennial all-star. I don't think he has it in him to be one of the absolute top hitters in baseball. And just going back to, you know, the defense here, like, it's kind of hard to mix and match things. Even guys that you would think would be like everyday players. Kerry Carpenter has not been an everyday player up to this point in his career, and he's not the greatest on defense. Colt Keith, who's been extremely hot so far this season, has missed, 2 games already, or has been taken out of at least 2 games already, something like that. So defense does concern me. I don't know how much better it's going to get. Hopefully some options open up by the time, you know, the trade deadline comes around. Maybe Max Clark is able to work his way through AAA and make it up to the big leagues. But yeah, I mean, we've got a couple cornerstones in Dingler and Parker Meadows out there, but hopefully gaining some experience with McGonigal and Colt Keith will help tighten the screws, you know, a little bit at least.
Yeah, and I do think McGonigal so far is significantly more acceptable at third and even short than maybe they projected him to be. I do think the intangibles are there, maybe not the range, but it seems like the footwork's there. The ability to get to balls is there. But yeah, and we'll talk about this a little bit more when we get to the AJ Hinch stuff and the fact or fiction, but this is a weird thing that just exists within this organization, which is the fact that pretty much every single one of their primary hitters, and this includes going down to the minor leagues, are left-handed guys. And, I mean, there's 3 guys, and Max Clark, Jose Briseño, and Bryce Rayner that aren't even here yet, all 3 left-handed bats. Now, look, these guys hit great, but there's going to be a lot of teams, and we've seen this in the past, you know, going back to, you know, the Kerry Carpenter in the early part of his career, and even that continues to this day, that are just going to say, hey, the second we get a chance, we're bringing our best lefty out of the bullpen because that's going to force you to make chess moves. That's going to force you to pinch hit for some of your guys, and that has been an issue at points and has led to some overmanaging, which we will talk about here in segment number 5. We will be back in segment number 3. We're going to talk about some controversy that went down in Major League Baseball out in Anaheim over the weekend. And we're going to discuss one of the unwritten rules of baseball. When is it acceptable for a team to throw at a player? We will be right back. Back for segment number 3, and throughout Major League Baseball season, we will be breaking down some just goings-on throughout the sport that may or may not be Tigers-related, and that's what we're going to talk about. Last week, we discussed the new ABS system, which I'm sure will be a point of controversy and contention as we continue to march along in this 2026 campaign. But I want to talk about something that went down over the weekend. This is very rare that I'm going to spend... I feel like I take so many shots at them, but they kind of deserve it. This much time talking about the Los Angeles Angels at all here in 2026, but here we are because we had an interesting moment and a controversial moment. First of all, a very active series. I'm going to just start with the fact that you had Joe Adell homering and robbing 3 home runs in that series against Seattle. I mean, probably in line to maybe be the single best individual performance in 2026 that we see by any player in a single game, but anytime we get a chance to talk about the unwritten rules, we're going to discuss it. So, look, Mike Trout at the dish. This was on Friday against the Seattle Mariners, right? Brian Wu on the mound for Seattle. Mike Trout, pedigree, legacy speaks for itself. Going to be a first-ballot Hall of Famer. Going to end up having a statue at Angel Stadium one day, right? Yes, I acknowledge not the player he once was, but he's still pretty darn good when he plays. Now, when you look at how you pitch to Mike Trout, the thing that you have to try to do, because he's always had some of the quickest hands, he's always been a good high ball hitter, he's always been a good low ball hitter, is you want to try to pitch Mike Trout inside. In this video, this can be found on my Twitter. I reposted it at Castellani 2014. Brian Wu, excellent pitcher for the Mariners, starts off by throwing a pitch well inside to Mike Trout that, you call it chin music, right? Almost hits him, and nearly does, and at that point, you're kind of wondering, okay, that's interesting, because I'm sorry, regardless of how intentional or not it is or isn't, anytime you get a pitch that close to a guy's face, you're going to wonder, okay, what in the world's going on here? Like, that's dangerous. Like, you're throwing a projectile at somebody. Next pitch, inside again, hits Trout. He's clearly not happy. Right? Later in the series, this was on Easter Sunday, Trout, I think, against a different pitcher, probably same strategy, gets pitched inside, gets hit in the hand, has to leave the game. As of the time of this recording, no update on what his injury is. We hope that he's obviously okay. Trout's been snake-bitten with injuries over the last several seasons. But this is one of those unwritten rule things that I want to discuss. Now, for people wondering if there was retaliation, yes, later in the game, Reed Detmers threw a pitch at the feet of Julio Rodriguez, not in the shoulder or head area, which is where Trout got hit, but this is just something, a broad thing that I wanted to discuss beyond just kind of this individual moment, which is it's generally frowned upon to throw at guys. And I'm not going to sit here and say that I'm certain Brian Wu was intentionally throwing at Mike Trout. In fact, from a pure strategy standpoint, he probably wasn't. I'm inclined to believe, why would you give a guy a free base? Why would you put a guy in danger like that? At the same time, 2 pitches in a row, 1 hits him. Regardless of the intentionality of the situation, there's probably going to be retaliation, and there was. So the question I'm going to pose to you, Austin, I'm going to pose to the people out there is, when is it acceptable to plunk a player for an opposing team? Now, my response to this before I toss it over to you is, I really don't think there's any situation, and I feel very strongly about this, there's any situation in which you should intentionally throw upstairs at anyone. I think that if you're going to the shoulder or face area, anything that's close to the head, anything that's close to the chin, out of bounds. I mean, you don't want to be, I don't want to exaggerate too much, but I'm really not, because unfortunately it's stuff that's happened before. With the spin rate these guys have now and the velo that these guys have, it's not out of the realm of possibility that a 95 to 100 mile per hour fastball hits somebody in that area and it ends their career. Or worse, like legitimately. I mean, that's the the velo that these guys are featuring nowadays. At the same time, when I watch as a fan and I see a Tiger get hit, I'm willing to give an opposing team one of those. not to say I'm giving him a free pass. It's me believing that an opposing team, even with as good as these guys' stuff and as good as their mechanics are, can miss and hit one of our guys one time. If it's the same pitcher and we see it twice, either you're not commanding the ball, therefore you shouldn't be throwing inside because you're going to be hitting guys, or two, you're doing it on purpose. And at that point, there is going to be some plunking. There is going to be retaliation. I think the last time we saw something like this on a massive level in Detroit was the Tigers and Yankees in 2017. Had a real back and forth that started in Yankee Stadium, and then it transferred back to Comerica Park, and it ultimately ended with Austin Romine and Miguel Cabrera, going to Dukes, or putting the Dukes up out behind home plate in a game in 2017. That was like the last big brawl that the Tigers had kind of in this situation. So my whole thing, I'll quote Spider-Man from Family Guy, everybody gets one. I will give you one and buy into the idea that somebody can make a mistake. After that, well, I'm not telling anybody to throw it intentionally at somebody's shoulders. I'm not telling anybody to throw it at somebody's head. You got to send a message at that point. And I acknowledge, just from on a human level, this is petty. And baseball is petty. And the unwritten rules are the pettiest things in the world. You can't flip your bat. You can't swing on 3-0 when you have a huge lead. You can't steal second or third when you have a huge lead. It's all about hurting people's feelings. I understand that. But from a pure baseball standpoint, as an admirer of this game, I give somebody one. I think the Angels were in the right to send a message to Julio Rodriguez there. Austin, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. There are differences in the unwritten rules. A lot of them are just about, are you showing up the other team? There is a clear line and a clear difference when it comes to the safety of other people. And there's also a difference in, are you throwing up and in, or did you just hit them? Because pitches can get away from you, right? We had to watch Gregory Soto here for how many years? Guys can be wild. That happens. But Brian Wu, who's supposed to be a very good pitcher, and I've seen him be very good, threw up and in, and it got away from him 2 pitches in a row. Now, strategically, I understand, you throw Mike Trout inside, that's how you're going to have success against him. But when you go back to back and don't have command of that ball twice, and later in the series, Trout gets hit again in the hand and he has to leave the game. That's just, if it were me, if I were Brian Wu, after hitting Mike Trout, I would have walked up to him and said something totally my bad, not trying to hit you, not trying to do that. And we didn't see that at all. I don't know why he would try to hit Mike Trout. I'm going to believe that it just got away from him. But just optically, it does not look good at all. And it just, as a baseball fan, it really sucks. Mike Trout was the best player on the planet for a decade, essentially. And his career has been riddled with injuries. I have no idea where his numbers could be right now if, he didn't suffer so many injuries. And on top of that, just as baseball fans, we haven't really seen Mike Trout get to do anything. He's been to the playoffs one time and he didn't win a single game, so as a baseball fan, I want to try to savor every moment we have with him in this game and just watching him do his thing. And, 10 games into this season, watching the freaking Mariners and Angels play, and, Mike Trout's in danger of potentially being out for the season, I hate to see that. So if Brian Wu truly did not mean to do that, he absolutely should have, made amends with that, in my opinion. I do think the Angels responded perfectly with Julio. They didn't actually hit him. They threw low. They threw behind him just to send a message. They're not trying to hurt him, but hey, we saw what you did. Let's cut this out, all right? And so I think they retaliated perfectly. I'm sure that, when Trout got hit on the hand, that was just a ball that got away from the pitcher there. Sucks to see. Hope Trout gets back fine, but context matters in these unwritten rules situations, and this one was a bit strange.
Yeah, it was, and I think that this will be the last point I'll make. It was surprising, especially when you're pitching to a player of Trout's caliber that everybody respects and loves. Wu, I'm not going to say he wasn't sorry, but you do often see, a hey man, my bad type of situation in those that kind of diffuses the situation. Kind of went right back to pitching, and I don't know what his quotes were after the game or anything like that, but it definitely led to an intense series early in the year out in Anaheim. Some pretty fun West Coast games there between the Angels and Mariners. All right, we will be right back. Austin will be running point on the All Say This segment, we're going to be talking a little bit about Tigers catcher Dillon Dingler, who is off to a wonderful start here in 2026. We will be right back. All right, we are back. Segment number 4. It is time for our All Say This segment. This is where I like to let Austin run with his opinions. He sent this to me. I felt like it was a perfect start. I'll just give you a little prerequisite and say that there haven't been many Tigers so far this season that have been as impressive as Dillon Dingler. He has led the team in home runs currently with 2, and for a minute was the only Tiger that had hit a home run. Carey has since hit 2 now, and seems like he's back. But Austin, today's All Say This segment, what do you got?
I'll say this, Dillon Dingler will be vital to the Tigers' success in 2026. And I say this for a few different reasons. We touched on earlier that he's one of the few guys on the defense that we have that we can really rely on, right? He has since surpassed Jake Rogers. He is the everyday catcher now. And he won a Gold Glove last year, and he's still pretty young. A lot of the players on the Tigers' defense have their struggles here and there. Of course, we have Parker Meadows out in center field, but the fact that we can rely on the catcher to be a cornerstone on that defense is huge, and that's one of the most important, if not the most important, defensive position that you have on the diamond. Now, offensively, I say this for a few different reasons. Chris, you've talked about in the past that you believe in bullpen variants, having guys that both right-handers and left-handers that, throw different speeds, have different types of arm angles and pitches and everything like that. We mentioned earlier that the Tigers just have so many lefties on this team, and it seems like we really lack a right-handed impact bat. Now, we've hoped for the longest time that Torque would evolve into that, and I still believe that. Torque is going to hit a bunch of home runs. He's going to drive in a bunch of runs. But he does not make contact consistently. He is constantly popping things up. His OPS, despite how much power he has, is consistently not that high. And we're already seeing the leash start to tighten on Torque this season. He slid down to 8th in the lineup a couple games ago. We've seen Colt Keith get some reps at first base this season. And so I really feel like if Torque doesn't take steps forward or show that he can, and also too, to this point, his numbers in high leverage situations are really, really bad. And I hope that I hope that turns around, because again, this dude went 1-1, and a lot of people will give Al Avila crap for that, but I don't think anybody else would have went 1-1. Any other team, any other GM at the time would have taken Spencer Torkelson. His college highlight reel was absolutely insane. But I really don't think that guys like Torque, Carey, and Riley are going to show you a whole lot, anything really that different from what we've seen in the past. Riley might be able to cut down on the strikeouts a little bit, but I don't think it's going to change drastically that much. Carey has been, he was hurt last season at times, so his overall numbers will get better, and he's the one of those 3 that has shown at times that he can come up in high leverage situations. But that has been a consistent concern among Tigers fans, is can the core of your order come up when you need them to, whether it was down the stretch last year to hold on to the division title and they weren't able to do it, whether it was, against the Mariners and be able to move past that ALDS Game 5. The Tigers wound up in the exact same position they were the year before. They got in as a wild card, won 1 series, and then fell short in Game 5 of the ALDS. So that's 2 years in a row now. I like these guys. I think they can produce, but I think when we're thinking about the core of the order and who really can take steps forward, the context of that might change this season. We're already seeing what Colt Keith can do, right? And him being able to take a step forward and being one of the best hitters in this lineup could change a lot. Kevin McGonigal as well, we're super excited about him. The fact that he can make contact as consistently as he does, the way that he battles is fantastic. But again, we just have so many lefties in this lineup, and if someone like a Dillon Dingler could emerge as that impact right-handed hitter, especially as a catcher, not just a catcher, but a great defensive catcher. I mean, that is a hot commodity in baseball if you have a good hitting catcher. And so I really think, the fact that he is one of the few defensive guys that can hold things down for the Tigers, and he's really the one right-handed hitter you have in this organization that I feel like still has room to grow and it could potentially emerge into that right-handed impact bat in the middle of the order. Because, I mean, keep in mind, like I said earlier, I don't think Riley has that capability to be that MVP type guy. Like, we don't have a Cabrera, we don't have an Aaron Judge. That's just not on this roster or in this organization. But if he could be somebody who hits 25 plus home runs, drive in, 90 plus RBIs, and gets slid up in that order, maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 hole, that could change a lot for the trajectory of this season.
Yeah, I'm with you, and it's something I talked about in my post-game video on Friday after the home opener, which is the idea of, like, look, if we're talking about locking up this young core, the idea of maybe Dillon Dingler potentially being a long-term lockup is more appealing than some of these other guys. And I think that one of the huge issues that we have, and you judge them differently based on expectations, and you judge them differently based on position. I understand that, but I think one of the huge issues that we have is, and you alluded to it there, when Torque goes cold, he's ice cold. I mean, there will be 0 for 17, 0 for 18 stretches with 2 walks and 11 strikeouts. It's the same with Riley. I think that their floors, well, very high ceilings, their floors are extremely low. With Dingler, at worst, what you have is a guy who can just provide you with elite Gold Glove caliber defense behind home plate. That is elite Gold Glove caliber defense at far and away the single most important defensive position. At best, you have a catcher with 20 to 25 home run potential who's also a Gold Glove caliber catcher behind the plate. So, yeah, I brought it up before the season, and this is how things work every year. Somebody's going to surprise us with underperformance. Somebody's going to surprise us with overperformance. I think last year was obviously Ding's kind of breakout year, but I think in terms of his process, the way he goes about things, the position he plays, I think that the organization has really started to see what we see with Dillon Dingler, which is a guy who I think has the ceiling of somebody who could start an all-star game one day. And I mean, I don't want to go there quite yet, but the fact is there's not a lot of hitting catchers across baseball that have the power that this guy has while also playing plus defense behind home plate. I think that if he can take that extra step that, let's be honest, like, Torque probably will never take at this point. And Riley kind of TBD, but I think that the perennial all-star MVP caliber hitter that we thought we may have had with Spencer Torkelson, I just don't think we're ever going to see that. I still think he can be fine, but Dingler kind of slowly getting better, and he's one of those players that you look at and you turn around one day and you're like, man, it doesn't shock me this guy's batting fifth. It makes sense that this guy is batting fifth while also being a tremendous option, him and Jake as that kind of catching tandem behind the dish. And look, as great as Dingler is as a catcher, you hit, they'll find a spot for you. There are going to be days in which Jake Rogers is going to be catching, and if that's the case, then you can spot Dingler at first base and not have to worry about taking any reps away from him while making sure that Jake still gets those reps behind the dish defensively. So it's an interesting thing to talk about. We will talk a little bit more Tiger stuff, focusing primarily on our AJ Hinch segment here in segment number 5. We will be right back. Segment number 5, we are here talking about the Detroit Tigers once again, and one of the big controversies over the weekend for this team was a few of the questionable managerial decisions made by AJ Hinch. This is a team that is known, and I'll talk about it here in a second, for being a team that pinch hits more than anybody. Let's get to today's Fact or Fiction segment. Austin, what is today's Fact or Fiction regarding the Detroit Tigers?
Fact or Fiction, AJ Hinch is an overthinker.
Okay. Fact, question mark, I'm Ron Burgundy? Because I think that the answer is yes. But it's not a negative yes necessarily. Look, you're going to find me defending AJ Hinch more than almost anybody else in this organization because I saw the way that this team played baseball before him. I saw the way that even when he had bad rosters, we would try to grind things out with weak players and poor lineups and, the pitching chaos and the managing of the bullpen. Like, if AJ Hinch were to not be in Detroit, he'd have a job tomorrow, like, without a doubt. Like, that's not the concern. At the same time, over the last few years, the identity of this ball club has been the assortment of the chess pieces, so to speak. They're bringing in a lefty. We're emptying the bench with righties. They're bringing in a righty. We're emptying the bench with lefties, right? We're going to follow the analytics. We're going to follow the platoon splits, and we are going to make sure that with every single at-bat, we are giving ourselves the highest percentage chance of being successful in that at-bat. And the reason why AJ did that, and he's not going to say this specifically, but like, it's true. The reason AJ Hinch has done that is because his team just hasn't had very good players. They haven't had that many everyday, consistent players that you can throw out there that you can trust against both right-handed pitching and left-handed pitching. Okay? The amount of guys that are in this lineup every single day, it's limited. It's like Riley, Glaber, and who knows? If even Torque sometimes, if they got a righty on the mound, they might let somebody else play first base or have Colt do it, right? The reason it's being brought up now is because over the weekend there were multiple instances in which Colt Keith either didn't play, like he didn't start the home opener, or was pinch hit for when a lefty pitcher was brought in by the St. Louis Cardinals. Now, in those situations, they brought in Jahmai Jones, who we all like, and who had some huge hits for this team a year ago, can hit for power, really good numbers last season against left-handed pitching. This is not like an Andy Ibanez situation from last year where the guy just stopped hitting at one point. I have faith that Jahmai can still be a really good platoon bat in this lineup. The issue is the sitting of Colt Keith for a couple reasons. Number one, and this is just the most simple solution right here, Colt Keith is great right now. The guy is red hot. He's seeing the ball better than anybody else on your team. Just optically, I want that guy at the dish regardless of what the situation is. Regardless of whether it's a right-hander or a left-hander, you feel good with Colt Keith at the plate right now. And I still feel, and I feel like we've seen this before, when you have situations where there are these stops and starts, you run the risk of kind of ruining a guy's hot streak by sitting him for a game or giving him 2 at-bats and then pinch hitting for him. You want to keep this guy in rhythm. It's not easy to come off the bench and pinch hit, and it's not easy to be taken out of the lineup for a pinch hitter. And I think that Colt, AJ, I got a comment saying this, AJ kind of managed his way out of a potential big inning in that situation, and it's led to a lot of frustration. So I just, right away, I fundamentally disagree with this situation because Colt Keith is hot. Number two, this is different with Colt than any other player because at a certain point, Colt Keith, who this team gave a contract to before he played a major league game, that you are paying into his 30s. It's not gangbuster, blockbuster money, but you're paying him money. You're clearly showing a lot of trust in his development. You did not give him that contract to be a platoon bat. I'm sorry. And maybe as a manager, if you are AJ Hinch, maybe you're not thinking to yourself, well, I can't take the contract into account necessarily. But in this particular case, I would say that you do. I think that if you're going to give a player X amount of money before playing a major league game, you are showing trust in that player to be an everyday player for you. Now, of course, there's going to be days off. Of course, there's going to be injuries. But when you have a young guy at full health whose greatest strength, his greatest asset is his knowledge of the zone and his bat, you keep him in the game. And I think that Detroit over the last several years has felt this need, and more often than not, it has worked, to platoon, to pinch hit, to play chess when other teams are playing checkers. I'll give you the statistic. Last year, Tigers had 211 pinch hit plate appearances. The next closest team was Cleveland with 169. Like, it wasn't even close. And I respect the fact that over the last few years, AJ has tried to make that the identity of this ball club. I think that it has led to them at points being very successful. But what if you have a star? How do you know if you do if you're not going to give him the opportunity in some of those high leverage situations against lefties? I mean, that's where I'll give AJ credit. Like, over time, as frustrated as it made us, he did start to give Kerry Carpenter those reps against left-handers. And we did start to see, even though he's still got crazy power, we still saw the flaws in Kerry Carpenter's game start to shine through. So to bring it back around, yes, AJ is an overthinker. I've seen a lot of managers in Detroit. Give me a million overthinkers as your manager over one underthinker, okay? Like, more often than not, AJ makes decisions that I do feel like numerically, statistically, are backed up by data. I'm also going to be that guy, and I'm as big a numbers guy as anyone. I also am that guy that looks at these situations and says, you got to look at the optics as well. Who would you rather have? Forget the numbers, forget the spreadsheet, forget the baseball reference page. In this situation, who are you feeling good about? And at this point in the season, look, maybe he'll take a dip and we can have a different discussion in a few weeks. But at this point in the season, I'm not really sitting anybody for Colt Keith with the kind of at-bats that he's putting in. This is really important for a guy that's gotten off to slow starts in his first 2 seasons to be getting the reps that he's been getting, to be seeing and hitting the pitches that he's been hitting. It's a really encouraging start, and I just feel like you run a risk of derailing the train potentially by not giving him those reps. So, yeah, yes, an overthinker. Still like AJ a lot. Still think he's a manager here, but that is an issue, especially with Colt, that I think a lot of people are going to be paying attention to. I can't get mad at anybody for their frustrations. All right, we will be back here for our final segment number 6, as we talk about gambling. We promote our wonderful sponsors at FanDuel, and I found a little, duo prop parlay future bet amongst Tigers, guys that we've talked about in the past, but I try to focus on the odds in these particular situations, and this one I found really appealing. We'll be back in segment number 6. FanDuel. Right now, new FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get $250 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. That's right. Turn $5 into $250 in bonus bets just for getting started. And when every possession matters in the playoffs, we got NBA playoffs coming up. That includes the Detroit Pistons locked into that 1 seed. FanDuel makes it very easy to get closer to the action. From player props on your favorite stars to all the tools you need to back them up, FanDuel puts player research right at your fingertips so you can check stats, trends, and matchups all in one place and make your picks with confidence. It's everything you need all in one app. So don't miss your shot. Head to FanDuel.com/BigPlay to get started. FanDuel, play your game. Ages 21 up for select states for Kansas in affiliation with Kansas Star Casino. 18 plus in D.C., Kentucky, Wyoming. First online real money wager only. $5 deposit required. Bonus issued as non-withdrawable bonus bets, which cover 7 days after receipt. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER, 1-800-MY-RESET. Call 1-888-789-7777. Visit ccpg.org/chat. For Connecticut, visit mdgamblinghelp.com. For Maryland, visit gamblinghelpma.org. Call 800-327-5050. Massachusetts, call 1-877-8-HOPE-NY. Text HOPE-NY for New York. And call 1-877-770-7867 for Louisiana. All right. So I don't want to get too redundant with our gambling segments, but the one thing that I want to try to find when looking at potential futures, prop bets, what have you, are legitimately good odds. And I try to focus on Detroit-based teams because that's our lane here. And I feel like I know these teams better than any other team. And last week I talked about the fact that with Chase DeLauder getting red hot after his initial first week, that the odds for Kevin McGonigal being Rookie of the Year, you probably wanted to get them now because the odds were probably going to become more and more likely as we got deeper into the campaign. But one thing I found that stunned me is that on FanDuel, and you can do this on FanDuel, go to the Sportsbook app, and you can find it there, is that you can bet on teammates to win individual awards. And the one that I found that I thought was nice and juicy from an odds standpoint, Tarek Skubal, American League Cy Young, Kevin McGonigal, American League Rookie of the Year, bet them together, that is plus 950. Really good value, because when you break it down and look, gamble responsibly, I'm not guaranteeing anything. This is simply just kind of based on the evidence that I see before me as a Tiger fan. Tarek Skubal is almost, no such thing as a guarantee, almost a lock to be a top 3 pitcher in the American League. Like, the odds of him winning the American League Cy Young for the 3rd year in a row are relatively high. We go into every Tarek Skubal start saying to ourselves, this guy is the best pitcher in the world. And if he can continue to prove that the way he has over the last few years, that's one half of this kind of parlay that you got here with these two guys going. And then with McGonigal, you have a guy who started the year on the major league team. And that does matter because he's going to get the consistent reps. Wins above replacement is a cumulative statistic, and if he plays a full 150, 160 game slate, we could be talking about a 4-WAR player, and he's going to have the counting totals, right, over a season with 15 to 20 home runs, with hopefully 60, 70 plus RBIs. You get to the end of the season, and you compare him to some of the other rookies, DeLauder being the exception, but some of the other rookies who maybe didn't start the year on their big league rosters, maybe didn't get called up to the middle of the season. McGonigal is going to have a noticeable head start just based on the fact that, I mean, the guy had 4 hits in his first game. Like, that's 4 more hits than a lot of these guys are going to have before we get to the months of May, June, July, because they haven't even been called up yet. I feel like at plus 950 for those two guys, I mean, I think both of them are likely to probably be top 3 in their individual categories. You take a future bet on them each winning those awards at plus 950, I think that's going to be a really good draw. So go to the FanDuel app, check that out. Tarek Skubal, Kevin McGonigal, plus 950. Skubal to win the American League Cy Young. Kevin McGonigal to win the American League Rookie of the Year. As we get deeper into the season, and this will be something that I want to talk about with Dingler at some point, we'll get to All-Star odds, and I do want to discuss that because I think that Dingler, even though we spent a whole segment talking about him, the possibility of him this year starting the All-Star game with Cal Raleigh getting off to a so-so start and Alejandro Kirk getting injured have gone way up. That may be something to keep an eye on because I still feel like Dingler is sort of a hidden gem that we know about here in Detroit, but the rest of the league might not know about yet. Hopefully they'll find out soon. So that will do it for today's edition of Big Play Detroit. We'll get the social media plugs out of the way here. You can follow me on Twitter at Castellani2014. You can find me on TikTok at Chris Castellani, Instagram ChrisCastle95. I've gotten a nice bump on Instagram recently with the Michigan basketball and obviously the Tiger post-game videos. Find us on YouTube, like, subscribe, Big Play Detroit, and of course all of our content can be found at CastellaniContent.com. Austin, plug away. Let's get out of here.
You can find me on X at Austin Sisler. Find me on Instagram at Austin Sisler _20. That's spelled Cisler. I've got link trees in both bios, things like YouTube channels and whatnot, where I archive some of the content that Chris and I create that doesn't necessarily go up on his channel. Thanks to everyone at Big Play for giving us this platform. Thanks for watching this video. And yeah, that should be everything.
Fantastic. We will be back next week with another show as we are in full baseball swing now with college basketball being finished, though we will continue to enjoy what was a banner year for the Michigan Wolverines as we march forward. So appreciate everybody's continued support as we continue to try to get this thing off the ground. Shout out to the Big Play Network. Shout out to our beautiful sponsor at FanDuel. We will talk to you again next week. Have a great rest of your week. Peace and happiness.